My father, Martin, passed away after a brutal 2-year battle with cancer. While I drained my savings and paused my life to care for him, my siblings, Jack and Clara, were ghosts. They only reappeared to claim their inheritance, but they didn't know Dad had one final, devastating surprise waiting for them. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence in the room was the loudest thing I had ever heard. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy, suffocating, the kind that presses against your eardrums and makes the air feel too thick to breathe. I was sitting in the high-backed vinyl chair next to the hospital bed, my hand wrapped around my father's cold, papery fingers. The rhythmic whoosh click of the ventilator was gone. The jagged lines on the monitor had flattened into a single, unyielding tone before the nurse had gently reached over and silenced it. "I'm so sorry, Nancy," the nurse, a kind woman named Brenda who had been with us for the last 3 weeks, whispered. She placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing tight. "He went peacefully. You made sure of that." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was filled with broken glass. I just stared at his face. Martin, my dad, looked smaller than I remembered, even though I had been the one lifting him, bathing him, and feeding him for the last 24 months. The cancer had carved him down to the bone, taking the strong, boisterous man who used to build deck chairs on weekends and leaving behind this fragile shell. But even in the end, his grip on my hand had been surprisingly strong, an anchor keeping me tethered to the earth as my world crumbled. Now he was gone. I looked at the clock on the wall. 4:12 p.m. "I need to call them," I croaked, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "Take your time," Brenda said softly, moving to the corner of the room to give me privacy. I pulled my phone from the pocket of my sweatpants. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped it. I scrolled to Jack and hit dial. It rang and rang and rang. "You've reached Jack. I'm closing deals right now, so leave a message. If it's urgent, text my assistant." I hung up and dialed again. I knew he was in a meeting. He was always in a meeting. He was a high-end real estate developer, a man who measured his self-worth in square footage and commission percentages. But this was our father. On the third attempt, he picked up. "Nancy, I am in the middle of a walkthrough with a client who is looking at a $6 million property." Jack's voice was a harsh whisper, dripping with irritation. "This better be an emergency." "Jack," I said, tears finally spilling over, hot and stinging on my cheeks. "He's gone. Dad's gone." There was a pause on the other end. For a second, I thought I heard a falter, a crack in the armor. "Okay," Jack said. His tone shifted, not to grief, but to business. "Okay, did he sign the papers for the transfer of the lake house title? You said you'd ask him on Tuesday." I froze, my breath hitched in my chest. "Jack, he just died, literally 5 minutes ago. His body is still in the room with me." "I know, Nancy, and that's tragic, obviously," Jack snapped, his impatience returning. "But the tax implications if that title is still in his name are a nightmare. Look, I can't talk. I'll call Clara. We'll be there I don't know, tomorrow morning? I can't leave the city tonight." "Tomorrow," I whispered. "Jack, I'm alone here." "You're good at handling things, Nance. You've been doing it for 2 years. Just handle the morgue stuff, keep the receipts. I'll see you tomorrow." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the screen blurring through my tears. I didn't have the energy to scream. I just dialed Clara. Clara was my younger sister, 32 years old and a self-proclaimed lifestyle architect. I still wasn't entirely sure what that meant, other than posting photos of perfectly arranged avocado toast and giving advice on manifesting abundance to her 50,000 followers. She answered on the first ring. "Nancy, oh my God, perfect timing. I need your opinion on this floral arrangement for the gala." "Clara, Dad died," I blurted out, cutting through her bubbly affect. Silence, then a long, dramatic gasp. "No, oh Nancy, no." He passed a few minutes ago, I said, feeling a numbness spreading through my limbs. Oh my God, I need to process this, Clara said, her voice trembling, though it sounded practiced, cinematic. I'm going to go live. My community needs to know why I'll be offline. They've been praying for him. Clara, please don't post about this yet, I begged. Can you just come to the hospital? Or the house? I really don't want to be alone tonight. Honey. I can't, she sighed, the tragedy in her voice replaced by a weary condescension. I'm in the Hamptons for the brand retreat. I can't just leave, it would be a breach of contract. I'll drive up with Jack tomorrow. Just make sure he looks presentable if people are coming over. I don't want to remember him looking, sick. She hung up. I sat there in the silence again, holding the hand of the only man who had ever unconditionally loved me. I had dropped everything, my career as a senior project manager, my apartment in the city, my dating life, to be here. I had slept on a cot in his study for 6 months so I could hear him if he coughed in the night. I had learned how to administer morphine, how to change catheters, how to soothe a man who was terrified of dying. And my siblings, the successful developer and the beloved influencer, couldn't be bothered to drive 2 hours to say goodbye. I looked at my father's face one last time. I leaned down and kissed his forehead, which was already cooling. It's okay, Dad, I whispered, a dark, cold resolve hardening in my chest, replacing the grief. They showed you who they were, and they showed me too. The betrayal in that empty room felt sharper and more fatal than the disease that had taken him. The next 24 hours were a blur of administrative agony. I signed papers, I chose a casket, I coordinated with the funeral home. I did it all on autopilot, fueled by stale hospital coffee and a burning, simmering rage that kept me upright. I went back to Dad's house, the house I grew up in, the house I had been living in for 2 years, and it felt cavernous. Every corner held a memory of his illness. The oxygen tanks in the corner of the living room, the wheelchair ramp I had installed myself, the whiteboard in the kitchen where we tracked his medication schedule. It was 11:00 a.m. the next day when the gravel in the driveway crunched under tires. I looked out the window to see Jack's sleek black Range Rover pulling up. Clara was in the passenger seat. They looked like they were arriving for a photo shoot, not a family tragedy. Jack was wearing a tailored charcoal suit, sunglasses, and talking on a Bluetooth headset. Clara was in an oversized, chic beige sweater and designer leggings, carrying a massive iced coffee. I opened the front door before they could knock. Hey, Jack said, breezing past me without a hug, still tapping on his phone. Traffic was a nightmare. Did you find the deed to the property? I need to check the zoning laws before we list it. Clara followed, pulling down her sunglasses. She looked around the hallway with a critical eye. It smells like old medicine in here, she wrinkled her nose. Nancy, didn't you air the place out? We can't have the wake here if it smells like a hospice. Hello to you too, I said, my voice flat. It's nice to see you. Thanks for asking how I'm doing. Clara sighed and gave me a limp, one-armed hug, careful not to spill her coffee. Oh, Nance, don't be passive-aggressive. We're all grieving. We just grieve differently. I process internally. Internally? I asked, raising an eyebrow. I saw your Instagram story this morning, the one with the sad filter and the link to your grief recovery affiliate program. Clara stiffened. That is how I connect with my support system. You wouldn't understand, you don't have an audience. Jack walked back into the hallway, pocketing his phone. Okay, let's focus. Nancy, when is the lawyer reading the will? I have a flight to Dubai on Thursday, so we need to wrap this up by Wednesday afternoon. The funeral is Tuesday, I said, staring at him. You're worried about your flight. Life goes on, Nancy, Jack said, walking into the living room and running a hand over the antique mahogany mantelpiece. Dad wouldn't want us to stop making money just because he's gone. Speaking of which. He pulled a pad of yellow sticky notes out of his suit pocket. What are those for? I asked, stepping between him and the television. Inventory, Jack said matter-of-factly. Clara and I talked on the drive up. Since you've been living here rent-free for 2 years, we figure it's only fair that we get first pick of the physical assets. You know, to balance things out. I felt the blood drain from my face. Rent-free? Jack, I gave up my job. I drained my 401k to pay for the experimental treatment your insurance didn't cover, because you said it was too risky to lend Dad the money. Investments, Nancy, Jack corrected, peeling off a sticky note and slapping it onto the grandfather clock. He wrote Jack on it in Sharpie. I couldn't liquidate assets at a loss. That's bad business. You were liquid. It made sense. I was liquid because I was saving for a down payment on a house. I shot back, my voice rising. A house I never bought because I moved here to wipe Dad's chin while you were closing deals. And we appreciate that, Clara chimed in, walking over tea. Oh, the china cabinet and placing a sticky note marked CLARA on a delicate porcelain vase. But you have to admit, you saved a lot on rent. Plus, you don't really have space for this stuff in your lifestyle. I mean, do you even have a job lined up? No, I said, my hands balling into fists. Because I was a full-time caregiver until yesterday. Exactly, Jack said, moving to the leather recliner, Dad's favorite chair. The chair he slept in when he couldn't breathe lying down. Jack slapped a note on the headrest. So, you're not in a position to maintain this stuff. It's better if we take it. We'll sell the house, split the proceeds 3 ways after we deduct the rent for the 2 years you stayed here, and then you can use your share to get a nice little apartment somewhere. Maybe go back to school. The condescension was so thick I could taste it. They didn't see me as a sister. They saw me as a squatter. A failed project manager who had tumbled down the socioeconomic ladder while they climbed. I looked at the yellow square on Dad's chair. It was a bright, cheerful color, completely at odds with the grief tearing me apart. You can't just claim things, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. The will hasn't been read. Mr. Henderson hasn't even unsealed it. Mr. Henderson? Jack laughed, a short, barking sound. That old dinosaur. Dad probably forgot to update that thing since Mom died in '98. It's going to be a standard 3-way split. We're just saving time. He moved toward the collection of vintage cameras on the shelf, Dad's pride and joy. Don't touch those, I snapped. Jack paused, looking at me with cold, amused eyes. Relax, Nancy. You're getting emotional. Just let us handle the business side. You're clearly distraught. I took a deep breath. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the sticky notes off and throw them out of the house. But then, a memory surfaced. A Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks ago, Mr. Henderson sitting at the kitchen table with Dad. Dad, frail and weak, but his eyes sharp as flint. He had looked at me, then at the paperwork, and then back at me. They think I'm blind, Nancy, Dad had whispered later that night. They think because my body is failing, my mind is gone, but I see exactly who is here, and I see exactly who is. I looked at Jack, smug and arrogant in his tailored suit. I looked at Clara, already browsing Zillow for the estimated value of the house on her phone. Fine, I said softly, tag whatever you want. Jack smirked, that's a good girl, be reasonable. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. Dad was a man of detail. He built things to last, and he inspected every joint, every screw, every weakness. And he had spent the last 2 years inspecting his children. To understand why their behavior that afternoon was so vile, you have to understand what the last 2 years actually looked like. When Dad was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the prognosis was grim. The doctors gave him 6 months. He fought for 24. At the time, I was living in Chicago, working as a senior project manager for a logistics firm. I was on track for a director role. I had a life. But when the call came, I didn't hesitate. I requested a leave of absence. When it extended beyond 3 months, they let me go. I didn't care. Jack and Clara, they had constraints. I can't be around sickness, Clara had told me over the phone in the first month. It lowers my vibration. I need to maintain a high-frequency state for my clients. I'll send crystals. She sent a box of quartz and a bill for the shipping. Jack was more pragmatic but equally cruel. I'll pay for a nurse, he had offered. I don't do bedside, it's not my skill set. But he never paid for the nurse. Every time the invoice came, there was an issue with his bank, or his assets were tied up in escrow, or he needed to review the line items until the agency threatened to quit. So I paid. I dipped into my savings, then my retirement fund. Then I sold my car. I became the nurse. I learned to crush pills into applesauce because he couldn't swallow. I learned to lift a 200-pound man to change his sheets. I learned to sit up all night reading him Western novels because the silence scared him. But the hardest part wasn't the work. It was watching him wait for them. Every birthday, every holiday, he would ask, "Did Jack call? Is Clara coming for Christmas?" And every time I had to lie. "Jack's stuck at the airport, Dad, heavy snow. Clara's sick, she doesn't want to infect you." He knew I was lying. I could see it in his eyes. The disappointment was a slow-acting poison, more painful than the tumors. The true antagonist of this story wasn't just cancer. It was Jack. He was the ringleader. He was the one who told Clara that Dad was exaggerating his pain to get attention. He was the one who convinced our extended family that I was mooching off Dad, living in the house to avoid getting a real job. Nancy loves the drama. I heard him say to our Aunt Linda at a barbecue I wasn't invited to. I found out because Clara posted a video of it. She's playing the martyr. Dad's fine. She just wants the house. That was Jack's narrative. He was a master of spin. He could take the reality of my sacrifice and twist it until I looked like a leech, and he looked like the benevolent, busy son who was too important to be bothered with mundane things like death. By the end, Dad had stopped asking for them. That was when I knew he was truly dying. He had let go of the hope that they would step up. 3 months ago, the pain became unmanageable. Dad required specialized in-home care that cost a fortune. I called a family meeting via Zoom. "We need $15,000 a month for the 24-hour hospice team," I told them, my eyes dark with exhaustion. "I have nothing left. My accounts are at zero." Jack checked his watch on the screen. "That seems excessive. Just put him in a state home. They're free." "A state home?" I choked out. "Jack, he built that house. He wants to die in his own bed." "Sentimentality is expensive, Nancy," Jack said coldly. "If you want to play nursemaid, that's on you. I'm not throwing good money after bad. He's terminal. It's a sunk cost." Clara nodded in her little Zoom square. "Yeah, and honestly, a facility might be better energetically. Cleanses the aura." I ended the call. I sat on the floor of the kitchen and wept until I couldn't breathe. Then, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I looked up. Dad had wheeled himself into the kitchen. He had heard everything. "Nancy," he rasped, his voice weak but clear. "Get up." "Dad, I'm so sorry," I sobbed. "I don't know what to do." "Get up," he repeated. "Call Mr. Henderson. Tell him to bring the book." "The book?" "The red ledger," Dad said, his eyes hard. "And the will, we're going to make an update." I didn't know exactly what was in that update. I had left the room when Mr. Henderson arrived, respecting Dad's privacy. But as I watched Jack placing a sticky note marked Jack on the vintage turntable Dad used to play Sinatra on, I prayed that the update was enough. I prayed that Dad had been as ruthless in that meeting as Jack was being now. While Jack and Clara were busy downstairs, treating our childhood home like a discount department store, I slipped away. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. I walked down the hallway to Dad's study. It was the one room in the house Jack hadn't violated yet, mostly because it smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco, scents that didn't align with his luxury aesthetic. I closed the heavy oak door behind me and leaned against it, listening to the muffled sounds of their voices. "This rug is authentic Persian, Jack. I can probably get $3,000 for it on Marketplace." "Focus, Clara, the silver. Where is the silver?" I locked the door. My eyes scanned the room. It was exactly as Dad had left it. The half-finished model ship on the desk, the wall of history books, the worn leather blotter. And there, Sitting innocuously on the corner of the desk was the item Dad had mentioned in his final moments of clarity. The red ledger. It wasn't a fancy book. It was a standard accounting log, the kind you buy at an office supply store for $5. I walked over and picked it up. My hands were shaking. I sat down in his desk chair, the leather creaking under my weight, and opened it. I expected to find financial records, maybe a list of accounts I didn't know about. Instead, I found a timeline. January 14th, called Jack. Left voicemail asking for help with transport to chemo, no return call. Called Clara, mailbox full. Nancy drove me. We stopped for ice cream after. She looked tired. February 3rd, Jack called. Asked if I had sold the lake lot yet. Told him I was in pain. He said, "Take a pill, Dad, business is business." Clara sent a card, pre-printed signature, no personal note. March 12th, Nancy paid the electricity bill. She thinks I don't know. She sold her watch. I saw the empty box on her dresser. I flipped through the pages, my heart hammering against my ribs. It went on for 2 years, every missed birthday, every ignored plea for help, every snide comment they made when they did bother to visit. He had written it all down. He hadn't been confused. He hadn't been out of it. He had been witnessing his own abandonment in real time, documenting the cruelty of his children with the precision of a forensic accountant. But the most damning entries were in the final month. August 4th, Jack visited, stayed 10 minutes, asked for a loan for liquidity issues. I told him I was dying. He checked his phone and said, "Everyone dies, Dad, don't be dramatic." August 20th, Zoom call. Jack and Clara refused to pay for hospice, called it a sunk cost. Nancy cried in the kitchen. She thinks I didn't hear. I am changing the will tomorrow. I closed the book. I felt cold, but it was a clarifying cold. It was the ice-cold sensation of absolute certainty. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Mr. Henderson. "Nancy," his gravelly voice came through the line. "I assume they've arrived." "They're here," I whispered, glancing at the locked door. "They're tagging the furniture with sticky notes, Mr. Henderson. They're arguing over who gets the rugs." "Vultures," the old lawyer grunted. "Did you find the ledger?" "I have it in my hand." "Good, bring it to the reading on Thursday. Do not show it to them. Do not tell them it exists. Let them dig their hole, Nancy. Let them get comfortable in their arrogance." "They want to sell the house immediately," I said. "Jack is talking about listing it next week." "Let him talk," Henderson said, a dark amusement in his voice. "He can list the moon for all I care. He doesn't own a single shingle of that roof. Just hold the line, Nancy. Can you do that? Can you endure them for 2 more days?" I looked down at the ledger. I read the line again. Nancy drove me. She looked tired. "Yes," I said, my voice steadying. "I can do it for Dad." "Good, see you Thursday. And Nancy, don't sign anything." I hung up and unlocked the door. I tucked the ledger into the back of my waistband, pulling my sweater down to cover it. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the bait. The funeral was a masterclass in hypocrisy. It was held at the small stone chapel where we had been baptized, a place that meant everything to Dad and nothing to my siblings. The pews were filled with Dad's old friends, guys from the union, neighbors he'd helped fix fences for, the lady from the bakery who always saved him a bear claw. And then there was the VIP section, as Clara had called it. Clara had arrived 20 minutes late, making a grand entrance in a black dress that was undoubtedly expensive but entirely inappropriate for a funeral. It was cut low, with a slit up the thigh. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses, looking like a widow in a soap opera. She had a videographer with her, a guy named Kyle who scurried around getting B-roll of her mourning. Jack was working the room. He wasn't crying, he was networking. I watched from the front row as he handed a business card to the funeral director. "Prime real estate," I heard him say, gesturing vaguely to the cemetery grounds. "Underutilized. You could fit at least another 40 plots if you regraded that hill. Call me. We can talk optimization." When it was time for the eulogies, I went first. I stood at the podium, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. I looked out at the sea of faces, Dad's friends, people who actually knew him. Dad wasn't a complicated man, I began, my voice wavering. He loved three things: his work, his woodshop, and his family. He taught me that love isn't a word you say, it's something you do. It's showing up when it's hard, it's staying when you want to leave. I looked directly at Jack and Clara. They weren't looking at me. Jack was checking his watch. Clara was checking her reflection in her compact mirror. He saw everything, I said louder. He knew who held his hand, and he knew who didn't. I stepped down. Then it was Jack's turn. He strode to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and put on his boardroom voice. Deep, projecting, utterly fake. Martin was a titan, Jack boomed. A man who understood the value of hard work, a trait he passed on to me. When I built my first firm, Dad told me. Jack proceeded to talk for 15 minutes. He didn't talk about Dad, he talked about himself. He told anecdotes where Dad was merely a prop to highlight Jack's own success. He turned his father's funeral into a LinkedIn post. Then came Clara. She wept, she wailed, she threw herself over the podium. My daddy, she sobbed into the microphone, pausing for Kyle to get the angle. He was my spirit guide. We were so connected. Even when I couldn't be here physically, we were communicating on the astral plane. I felt his pain. I feel it now. It was grotesque. The people in the pews shifted uncomfortably. Aunt Linda leaned over to me and whispered, "Has she ever even visited him in the last 5 years?" "No," I whispered back. After the service, we stood by the graveside. As the casket was lowered, the reality hit me like a physical blow. He was really gone. I was alone. I felt a hand on my elbow. I turned, expecting comfort. It was Jack. "Hey," he whispered, leaning in close. "Listen, I have the realtor coming to the house at 4:00 p.m. I need you to clear out your junk from the guest room. We need it staged." I stared at him. The casket hadn't even touched the bottom of the grave yet. "Jack," I hissed, "we are burying our father." "And that's sad," Jack said, his eyes hidden behind Ray-Bans. "But the market is hot, Nancy. Inventory is low. If we list by Friday, we can have a bidding war by Sunday. I'm doing this for us. You need the money, right? Unless you want to go back tea." "Oh, being a barista, or whatever you're doing." Something snapped inside me. "I wasn't a barista, Jack. I was a director of operations." "Was," Jack corrected. "Now you're unemployed. Look, just clean the room. And sign the waiver I left on the kitchen counter. It just says you agree to the accelerated sale process." "I'm not signing anything," I said, my voice low and dangerous. Jack's jaw tightened. "Don't be difficult, Nancy. You're out of your depth. I'm trying to help you maximize your inheritance. Don't make me fight you on this." "You can't sell the house, Jack." "Why not?" he scoffed. "We're the heirs, majority rules. Clara agrees with me." I looked him dead in the eye. "You might want to check the date on that listing agreement, Jack, because until the will is read, you don't own a damn thing." Jack laughed, a cruel, dismissive sound. "The will is 20 years old. It's a standard split. Stop playing lawyer, Nancy. It's pathetic." He walked away to shake hands with the priest. I looked down at the grave. "Let them dig," Henderson had said. Jack had just brought out the shovel. The night before the will reading, the atmosphere in the house was toxic. Jack and Clara had taken over the living room. They had opened a bottle of Dad's frantically expensive 18-year-old scotch, a bottle he had been saving for my wedding, and were drinking it out of coffee mugs because they couldn't find the crystal glasses I had hidden them. I was in the kitchen, making tea, when Jack walked in. He leaned against the doorframe, swirling the scotch. "We need to talk," he said. The veneer of politeness was gone. He looked tired and agitated. "About what?" "About tomorrow," Jack said. "Mr. Henderson, he's old school. He's going to drag this out. Probate, taxes, fees. He's going to bleed the estate dry with billable hours." Clara wandered in, scrolling on her phone. "Yeah, Nancy. Jack says if we just agree to a private settlement tonight, we can fire the lawyer and handle it ourselves. We can wire you your share next week." "My share? I asked, leaning against the counter. And what is that exactly? We did the math, Jack said, placing a document on the counter. The house is worth $800K. The accounts have maybe $200K. That's $1 million total. Divided by 3, that's $333,000 each. He tapped the paper. However, Jack continued, Clara and I feel that since we'll be handling the sale, the legal work, and the logistics, we should take a small management fee. Plus, we need to deduct the rent you owe for the last 2 years. Market rate for a house this size is $3,000 a month. That's $72,000. I stared at him. You want to charge me rent for taking care of our dying father? It's just business, Nancy, Clara said, grabbing a cookie from the jar. You got free housing. We had to pay mortgages. It's only fair. So, Jack said, pulling a pen from his pocket, we're offering you a buyout of $150,000. Cash, no waiting for probate. You sign this, you get the check, you move out by Sunday. Clean break. $150,000. It was an insult. It wouldn't even cover the lost wages and savings I had burned through. And if I don't sign? I asked. Jack's eyes narrowed. Then we do it the hard way. I'll sue the estate for mismanagement. I'll claim you coerced Dad in his final days. I have lawyers on retainer who eat people like you for breakfast. I'll tie this up in court for 5 years. You'll be bankrupt before you see a dime. He took a sip of the scotch, Dad's scotch. Think about it, Nancy. You're broke, you have no job, you have no leverage, take the deal. I looked at the document. It was a sloppily written family settlement agreement. I looked at Clara, who was bored, picking crumbs off her sweater. I looked at Jack, who looked like a predator cornering a wounded animal. They truly believed they were the powerful ones here. They believed that money and status trumped everything. They had no idea that upstairs, in the drawer of my nightstand, was the red ledger. They had no idea that Mr. Henderson wasn't just some old-school lawyer, but the fiercest estate attorney in the county who had been plotting this meeting with Dad for months. I picked up the pen. Jack smirked. He thought he had won. I twirled the pen in my fingers, then set it down gently on the counter. No, I said. Jack's smile vanished. Excuse me. I said no, I'm not signing it. I'm not taking your deal. You are making a massive mistake. Jack stepped closer, his voice dropping to a growl. You are choosing war, Nancy, and you are going to lose. Maybe, I said, picking up my tea, but I think I'll wait to hear what Dad has to say about it first. Dad is dead, Jack shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. He has nothing to say, it's just us. We'll see, I said calmly. Save the scotch, Jack, you might need it tomorrow. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them fuming. As I climbed the stairs, I heard Clara whisper, Is she crazy? Why isn't she scared? She's bluffing, Jack spat. She's desperate, she'll sign in the morning. I went into my room and locked the door. I pulled the red ledger out and held it to my chest. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was pounding with the adrenaline of the hunt. They wanted a war. They were about to find out that while they were building empires, Dad and I had been building a bunker. And tomorrow, I was going to drop the bomb. Mr. Henderson's office looked exactly like the man himself, old, imposing, and smelling faintly of pipe tobacco and justice. It was located in a brownstone downtown, a building that had survived 3 recessions and a fire. We sat in a semicircle around his massive oak desk. Jack and Clara had taken the 2 comfortable leather wingback chairs, leaving me with the stiff wooden seat usually reserved for paralegals. Jack checked his Rolex for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Mr. Henderson, Jack said, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. With all due respect, we have schedules to keep. My sister has a flight and I have a board meeting. Can we skip the preamble? We know the breakdown. Equal thirds. Just show us where to sign for the probate release. Mr. Henderson didn't look up. He was meticulously cleaning his spectacles with a silk cloth. He was 80 years old, with snowy white hair and eyes that looked like they could see through lead. Mr. Henderson, Jack pressed, his voice sharpening. I heard you, Jack, Henderson rumbled, placing his glasses back on his nose. And I am moving at the pace required by the law. If you are in a rush, you are welcome to leave. But if you leave, you forfeit your right to contest any findings in this room. Clara huffed, crossing her arms. This is ridiculous. It's a formality. Death is never a formality, young lady, Henderson said, opening a thick file folder on his desk. Now, let us begin. He cleared his throat. I am reading the last will and testament of Martin Edward Caldwell, dated 2 months ago. This document supersedes all previous wills, including the one from 1998. Jack froze. Wait, 2 months ago, Dad was. He wasn't competent 2 months ago, he was on heavy medication. I have a physician's affidavit of competency attached to the will, Henderson said, tapping a piece of paper. And a video recording of the signing. Your father was entirely lucid. In fact, he was sharper than I've seen him in years. Jack sank back into his chair, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Clara stopped scrolling on her phone. Article 1, Henderson read. Revocation of prior bequests. All previous distribution plans are null and void. Article 2, the distribution of assets. My estate, including the primary residence, the lake property, the investment accounts, and the physical chattels, shall be distributed according to the loyalty clause outlined in the attached codicil A. Loyalty clause? Clara asked, wrinkling her nose. What is that? Is that a legal term? It is a term your father created, Henderson said. The clause states, my children claim to love me, they claim to support me, but words are wind, actions are stone. Therefore, my assets shall be divided based on a point system derived from the record of their actions during the final 24 months of my life. Jack laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. A point system? This is a joke, right? Dad was pranking us. He had a weird sense of humor. It is not a joke, Henderson said. He reached into his drawer and pulled out the red ledger. I saw the color drain from Jack's face. He recognized the book. He had seen it on Dad's desk for years, but he had never bothered to open it. This, Henderson said, placing his hand on the cover, is the caregiver's log. It was maintained daily by Martin. It records every visit, every phone call, every dollar spent, and every interaction he had with his 3 children. Each positive action, a visit, a bill paid, a kindness, accrues points. Each negative action, a refusal to help, a missed holiday, a cruel comment, deducts them. This is insane, Jack stood up, his face reddening. You can't base a legal inheritance on a diary. That's hearsay. I'll contest this in probate court so fast your head will spin. Sit down, Jack, Henderson barked. The command was so authoritative that Jack actually sat. The will grants the executor, me, sole discretion to interpret the log. And frankly, the math is quite simple. Henderson opened the ledger. Let's look at the scores, he said. Jack, in the last 24 months you visited your father a total of 3 times. Total duration, 45 minutes. I'm a busy man, Jack shouted. I was building a future. On October 14th, Henderson read, ignoring him, Jack called, asked to borrow $20,000. When I said I needed it for chemo, he told me I was being selfish. The room went dead silent. Did you say that, Jack? Henderson oaked over his glasses. That's out of context, Jack sputtered. We were discussing investment strategy. Henderson turned the page. Clara, total visits, 0. I have a weak immune system, Clara shrieked. I sent him energy healing. Entry from December 25th, Henderson read. Christmas. Alone, Nancy cooked a ham. Clara posted a photo of herself in Aspen with the caption, family is everything. She did not call. Clara's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Entry from July 10th, Henderson continued, his voice like a hammer. Asked Jack and Clara for help with hospice costs. Jack called it a sunk cost. Clara suggested a state home to cleanse the aura. Nancy sold her car to pay the nurse. I looked at my hands, tears stinging my eyes. Hearing Dad's words read aloud was like having him in the room with us. "The final tally," Henderson said, closing the book. "Jack, negative 400 points. Clara, negative 350 points. Nancy, positive 12,000 points." Henderson looked up. "Based on the loyalty clause, the distribution is as follows. To Jack and Clara, Martin leaves the sum of $1 each. This amount is to ensure you cannot claim you were forgotten. You were remembered perfectly." "$1, Jack whispered. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. "And," Henderson added, a small, grim smile playing on his lips, "he also leaves you the outstanding invoices for the energy crystals and the shipping costs, Clara. He felt it was only right you pay for your own contributions." "This is illegal," Jack screamed, jumping to his feet again. "I'm the eldest son, I have rights, I have investors counting on this money, I leverage the inheritance." "You what?" I spoke up for the first time. Jack spun around to face me, his eyes wild. "I leveraged it. I took a bridge loan against the estate value to cover a margin call. If I don't get that liquidity by Monday, I'm ruined." "That sounds like a you problem, Jack," Henderson said coolly. "As for the remainder of the estate, the house, the lake property, the savings, the vintage car collection, and the entirety of the stock portfolio, it is bequeathed to Nancy, the only child who understood that being a family member is a job, not a title." "Nancy," Clara turned to me, grabbing my arm, her nails digging in. "Nancy, you can't do this. You have to fix this. We're siblings, you have to share. Dad was sick, he didn't mean it." I looked at her hand on my arm. The same hand that had been too busy holding a mimosa to hold a phone to call our dying father. I gently, but firmly, peeled her fingers off me. "He meant every word, Clara," I said, my voice steady. "He was the sanest person I knew, and honestly, I think he was generous." "Generous?" Jack spat, sweat beading on his forehead. "He gave us $1. "He gave you the truth," I stood up. "He let you see yourselves through his eyes. That's a rare gift. Most people go their whole lives thinking they're the hero of the story. Dad just showed you the villain edit." "I'm not leaving." Jack slammed his hand on the desk. "I'm not leaving until you sign a deed transfer." Henderson pressed a button on his desk. 2 seconds later, the heavy door opened, and a security guard, a large man named Tiny who I recognized from high school, stepped in. "Mr. Henderson," Tiny asked. "Please escort these 2 beneficiaries out of the building," Henderson said, returning to his paperwork. "And make sure they take their dollar bills. I don't want to owe them anything." Henderson slid 2 crisp singles across the mahogany desk. Jack stared at the bill. He looked at me, his eyes full of hate, panic, and desperation. "You'll regret this, Nancy," he hissed. "You don't know how to handle money. You'll lose it all." "Maybe," I said, "but I won't lose my soul. Get out, Jack." Jack snatched the dollar bill and stormed out. Clara followed, sobbing loudly about how she was going to be canceled if this got out. When the door clicked shut, the silence returned. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was light, it was clean. Henderson took off his glasses and looked at me. His eyes were soft. "He was very proud of you, Nancy," he said quietly. "He wanted you to know that. He didn't just leave you the money. He left you the freedom to never have to rely on people like them ever again." I reached out and touched the red ledger. "Can I keep this?" "It's yours," Henderson said. "It's the history of your love and their failure." The fallout was swift and brutal, exactly as Dad probably predicted. Jack's house of cards collapsed within the week. It turned out he hadn't just leveraged the expected inheritance, he had been living on borrowed time for years. When the liquidity didn't arrive, his creditors descended. He lost his condo, his Range Rover, and his reputation. The last I heard, he was living in a rental apartment in New Jersey, working as a junior sales rep for a solar panel company. He tried to sue me. Of course, but Henderson had made the will ironclad. The loyalty clause held up in court as a valid expression of testamentary intent. The judge actually laughed when he read the entry about the crystals. Clara fared differently, but perhaps worse for her ego. In her rage, she took to social media to expose me as the greedy sister who manipulated a dying man. She posted a 10-minute tearful video, creating a narrative where she was the victim. But she forgot one thing: the internet loves receipts. I didn't respond with a video. I didn't argue. I simply posted one photo. It was a picture of the page in the red ledger dated Christmas Day. Entry: Christmas. Alone, Nancy cooked a ham. Clara posted a photo of herself in Aspen. She did not call. Alongside it, I posted a screenshot of her Instagram from that exact date, showing her holding a champagne glass in the snow with the caption #FamilyFirst. The internet did the rest. Her followers turned on her overnight. She was branded a fraud and a narcissist. She lost her brand deals, her community, and her platform. She went dark on social media and, according to Aunt Linda, moved in with a boyfriend she had previously called Bridge and Tunnel. As for me, I didn't sell the house. I couldn't, it was full of Dad. I used the inheritance to pay off the medical debts first, every single penny, so Dad's name was clear. Then I renovated the house, but not the way Jack wanted. I kept the wood shop. I kept the vintage cameras. I made it a home again. 6 months after the funeral, I was sitting on the back porch, watching the sun go down over the garden Dad had planted. The air was cool, smelling of damp earth and pine. I had started my own consulting business, working from Dad's study. I was making less money than I did in Chicago, but I was happier. I slept through the night. I had the red ledger on the table next to me. I didn't read the bad parts anymore. I only read the good ones. May 4th, Nancy made soup. We laughed about the time the dog ate the turkey. A good day. June 12th, pain is bad today. Nancy sat up with me. She held my hand. I am not afraid because she is here. I ran my hand over the page. Jack and Clara thought wealth was about assets, about what you could take, what you could leverage. They thought loyalty was a transaction. But as I sat there, watching the fireflies begin to dance in the twilight, I knew the truth. Loyalty wasn't a transaction. It was an investment. I had invested everything I had into the last 2 years of my father's life, not expecting a return, but simply because it was right. And in the end, that investment had paid the highest dividend of all: peace. I took a sip of iced tea and looked up at the first star appearing in the sky. "Thanks, Dad," I whispered. And for the first time in 2 years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like an embrace.